Are TVs just becoming like extravagant and expensive murders? It almost seems like nobody has any use for them anymore. Is there any point in having one, really?
Britain's Got Talent could be on the chopping block. Worst viewing figures in 17 years.
It's all happened very quickly, I think. And very quickly, everybody has become a broadcaster and everybody has become a journalist. And at the same time, the wall between journalism and promotion and advertising has crumbled.
The way people watch or get their news is changing for the first time. Slightly more people are getting their news online and slightly fewer are watching it on TV.
There's still people out there that are living in their mum's bedroom that just, they're still blowing them out of the water.
In fact, you and I were talking about social media before this, about just not having Instagram on your phone and not dealing, and you feel better.
It's the intelligence of the mob.
Welcome to Simple Conversations with ASG.
Did you ever think in your life you would see the day when the TV industry would lose to a YouTuber with a tripod recording in his bedroom?
No. Although my former wife was a TV morning presenter, and she used to have this fantasy dream. Instead of getting up at 2:30 in the morning, which she did, to go and do the breakfast show, she had this fantasy that all the camera crew would come into her bedroom and all she had to do was get up, and put the pillow behind her back, and she could read the autoprompter live from her bed, sitting up. That was her recurring dream. To answer your question, it's all happened very quickly, I think. And very quickly, everybody has become a broadcaster and everybody has become a journalist. And at the same time, the wall between journalism and promotion and advertising has crumbled. So at the same time that you're an advertiser, you can also pretend to be a journalist or vice versa. And so not only have we become ADHD, but we've also kind of lost our sense of, what's true and what's promotion or what's sales. When I was growing up, when I was a student in Cardiff in journalism school, they used to call these things pseudo events, and pseudo events were things that just sort of happened for the sake of the publicity. Think David Beckham. It's not real. What's going on is not real. He's not really playing soccer or football. He's actually selling his shirt. He's selling the number, he's selling the name. He's not actually crossing the ball into the penalty box for the fun of it. And so these pseudo events, appear to have taken over real life. I think a modern day example might be, the space rocket that went up with the celebrities in it the other day. Purely just to get publicity so they can, sell people, pay $1 million to go up in one of these things and make a profit from it, So this has all happened really, really quickly. But one thing I notice is, and this is a long answer, I know, but one thing I've noticed is that my students, I teach at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C., my students would rather look into the computer than in each other's faces. If I tell them to have a little group meeting of the 6 of them or the 10 of them together, they will sit around with the computer, but they will all be staring at the computer. They won't look each other in the eye. And that's what worries me more than anything is that, the whole world now, the answers to everything we're told are in that little box that you and I are both staring at. All the answers to everything we need to know are in there. They're not in the minds and the faces of the people that we're talking with.
Yeah, I see what you mean by it happened very quickly, because even whenever I was growing up, and still even whenever I was 20, 21, TV was like the pinnacle for an entertainer. Like if you were an entertainer and you got on TV, you've made it. But it almost seems now, if you are on TV rather than social media, it's almost like retirement home now. It's like became, like if you can't go on and make a 10-minute YouTube video and sell yourself there, but you have to go on TV to do it, you've lost your whole career. You pretty much are ready for a P45.
Yeah. I mean, in the BBC, it used to be easy to teach journalism because you could say, for instance, on BBC One or for instance, in the New York Times or whatever, now they don't read the New York Times. They don't watch BBC One News. They're on social media. They're scrolling on social media the entire time, And so it's very hard to say, here's a benchmark for what you could aim at, right? Here's how to be an aspiring journalist. Look at this publication or this magazine or this radio station. And then the other funny thing was, we thought we were in charge of the world. When I worked on the 6 o'clock news and then what was then the 9 o'clock news, we thought we ran the world, we are the BBC. We know what's happening tonight, and you will sit down and damn well listen, and we'll tell you what's most important, and then what's second, and then we'll give you the furry elephant story at the end. We have lost that control as producers and broadcasters. We've completely lost control of that, to folks like you, basically, who develop your own thing. And if it flies off, and people say, hey, have you heard of this guy or this person or this woman, and it flies off and it becomes popular for whatever reason, and a lot of the time organically. And so I think that's moving along. My only hope is that, we all get older, right? And the demographic of television has always been quite old. So maybe the folks who are scrolling now will still be sitting in front of, EastEnders or something in 30 years' time. They'll want something a lot slower. But I think that's just so wishful thinking of an old guy.
Yeah, I originally had that thought as well, like, oh, we're all just gonna get a bit older and watch TV. Like, I remember my parents always having the TV on, but I was doing some like research into the whole drop off of entertainment and TV and journalism, because it's almost fascinating from where we grew. Like, whenever I was growing up about it, and something I realized is like people are still watching TV shows, they're still watching what's on TV regularly, but they're not watching it live. They're waiting until it comes up on the streaming platform that's free, and then they're going and watching that while they're watching something else on a different screen. Like, it's almost like TV is now becoming YouTube in a way. Like, it's almost you need to have it and then upload it somewhere for people to just come at their own time. They don't want to watch it live anymore.
Well, when I worked in radio, I worked hard on promotions. I worked at a radio station in Washington, and we had these promotional spots for programs, and they'd say, that's a fascinating documentary on the effects of 13th century Chinese porcelain on post-war Germany, and you can hear it on Sunday night at 5, or whatever. And it's like, I'm saying, I'm the boss here, and I'm saying, do you think people are stopping the car and making a note of this? Are you kidding me? This is no good. What we need is next show after that, tomorrow at this time, something that people can remember, because radio and podcasting are multitasking media. People are doing other stuff, which is one of the great advantages. You don't have to sit down, pay attention to the BBC News for 30 minutes. You can hear it, and you can make the coffee, or you can carry on working at your computer while you're listening. And at the point, and if it's good enough broadcasting, good enough podcasting, you don't even realize that you're absorbing the information that you're getting in your ears, and you can take it with you now, as you say. I'm looking forward to watching myself or listening to myself gabbling on here, in a couple of weeks' time in the car or whenever I want to, right? I don't have to wait till 2:45 on a rainy Tuesday, And so that is the great advantage now, is portability, I think, of podcasting and YouTube.
Yeah, I do think that social media has really killed the news in all ways, sort of, because I think of the different apps that are made now specifically for different parts of the news, like the weather apps there. It's on, you can put it on your lock screen. You can put news apps on your lock screen. Or I spoke about this with Joseph Setter, who works big in the corporate world. I've signed up to this email service called The Knowledge. And what it does is it takes every big headline in the news in every country that day and breaks it into 5-word headlines. And it's so easy to digest. You know exactly what's happening. And it's almost like the news couldn't find a way to match the short form, because people could just read what happened in the news, leave it down for a minute, come back to it later, come back to it again before they go to bed, and they don't need to tune in at a certain time. Do you ever think that's maybe the thing that's killed TV in general, is we can walk around now with it wherever we are?
Yeah. You don't have to sit down at the time that they prescribe. You can choose any time, right? And like you said, you can watch half of it. If you get tired, you can go to bed and watch the other half the following day, But I think the biggest problem with social media, I call it, I think the first example of crowdsourcing was the crucifixion, was the crucifixion. It's the intelligence of the mob. And so because they reflect back at you what everybody else thinks, that's a sort of a rolling stone growing moss, if you like. So if you start a rumor on X or one of these platforms, that then grows and grows and grows until everybody gets it, and it might be a lot of nonsense, right? And at school we studied the Lancashire witches, There's a bunch of kind of ordinary women who are trying to figure out how to cure colds and coughs and flu and stuff using the plants and the trees around them, And because of the gossip in the village, they were all hung and drowned and murdered and accused of being witches because of the gossip that went around the village. And to me, a lot of social media seems like that only multiplied 1 billion times.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, I've tried to think in my head so much about like TV shows, like scripted TV shows that I remember whenever I was a kid and stuff that like BBC, ITV, Channel 4 they would just, that was their whole identity, and like it almost, they don't exist anymore. But started thinking this in my head, like looking further down the line, because phone addiction's not going anywhere. It's going to get much worse where these phones develop more and more and AI develops. So could you see a world genuinely in your head where TV shows become like 15 minutes or less, like opening scene, big moment, end credits, finished, gone, next episode?
I think they'll probably wither on the vine entirely before anybody thinks of that.
I might have just got a million dollar idea.
It's like, when occasionally, people go back and watch the old reruns of Charlie Chaplin, and some of those Charlie Chaplin films were only 10 minutes,
You look at things like
So maybe he had,
Seinfeld or Friends, it was 20-minute episodes.
yeah, so maybe he had something.
Might
So
have been
maybe
ahead
you're
of its
right,
time.
maybe it will go that way. I think, a far riskier kind of pastime really is, far riskier endeavor is sports, the long sports. I watched a cricket match on YouTube the other day. It was Lancashire. It's one of these county matches. My God, I've never seen anything like it. Lancashire scored 6 runs in about 2 hours. The place was completely empty. It was raining. What are we going to do with that? The sports that are made for TV or can be packaged for TV are going to soar. But the ones that were made for the average spectator or your retired guy who goes to the game and watches all day are in real trouble. The best example of that is baseball, where they're trying to make the bases bigger. They're trying to make the pitchers pitch the ball more quickly. They're trying to piddle around the edges and do whatever the hell they can to speed this thing up so that younger people will be more engaged with it, But it's it's a very tricky endeavor, really. If you look at American football, it's designed well for current TV. There's 1
Yeah.
minute of action, 2 minutes of commercials.
Yeah, the big events got the
2
halftime
minutes of
show.
action, 1 minute of commercials.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see whether people will absorb that level of saturation of advertising in the future, when they can just go and watch 5 minutes highlights of the game later.
Yeah, you can tell though they're struggling to innovate and adapt, because even just like football in the UK, they're having a real issue now at the moment because they're trying to kill time wasting, because they don't want there to be 6, 7, 10-second breaks because they think people's going to click off. But the problem is now the athletes are under so much pressure. There's so many more injuries, so the viewership's going down because their favorite player isn't playing anymore all the time. He's not playing regularly, and they're now trying to push for shorter games. Like they want, instead of the advertising board going round the pitch, they want it to flash up on the screen. So you could miss a goal because an advert for Burger King's flashed up. It's insane innovation they're going to have to go to. But the unfortunate reality is they're going to have to do it. They have no choice now.
Yeah, I think that has also bred the obsession with individual players. And having watched a lot of American television the last few years, they are completely obsessed with American players. So, if Argentina are playing, it's nothing but Messi, it's so, if Manchester United are playing, it's nothing but Bruno Fernandes, it's deeply irritating, frankly. And so if you need an answer why Americans are no good at team sports, for the most part, have trouble with team sports, it's because of the American obsession with individual celebrity and success, I think, And I think the new social media is driving that. I think it's driving that even faster.
Yeah, well, that's something I did want to touch on, because I've been kind of speaking to a few people that I haven't interviewed them directly, but I've interviewed people that work for their companies and have just got their contacts, and they've been saying things like they're seeing at the moment TV shows are really losing any interest because they're struggling to create the same relatability factor that a YouTuber's doing, because a YouTuber is in one niche and he knows everything about it. He's done it before. He's came up on it, and he can make content that's going to speak to somebody just scrolling past and hook them. TV shows apparently at the moment, because you're making your own script, you're making something out of nothing. They're really, really like apparently dangerously struggling now to create that relatability, which goes into what you're saying. They might lose the viewership completely by not being able to innovate in that direction.
I mean, the interesting thing I think for YouTubers is, if you're a YouTuber who puts like a 45-minute show together each week, are the shorts, are the 1 minute clips that you put in the shorts section of YouTube, are they getting more viewers than the actual show itself? And the answer for a lot of the people that I work with, the answer is yes.
Yeah, for me
the
it is.
shorts get thousands of more hits. Of course, you have to multiply that number by by the amount of time that the shorts have taken relative to the show itself. But there comes a point where you say to yourself, is it worth making this big show? Why didn't I just do, 10, 15, 10 1-minute clips?
Yeah.
Because the statistics, might support that for a lot of people.
It does. I was reading about the TV show Waterloo Road in the UK that they had, like, in their last season, they had 2 or 3 more episodes planned, I think, but they put out a TikTok and an Instagram reel that it looked like kind of like a final trailer. I think it was just so over edited. It looked like this is coming to an end, but it got more views on both platforms than every single episode ever got. Like, I think they said there were seasons you could add together and it still wouldn't even touch the views it got. So they had to just put out the episode the trailer before and finish it there. They had to create a new ending to try and hook it, try and jump on the bandwagon.
I mean, this is crazy, isn't it? It's crazy. And then they would rather package up as a small number of shows and then reuse them and resell them onto apps or cable networks or whatever, for repeats.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't underestimate nostalgia, especially somebody as old as me. I mean, I still, when there's nothing to watch, if I suffer from insomnia, and sometimes I just need something to look at for half an hour at midnight, or 1 o'clock in the morning when I should be sleeping. And there's always a Jerry Seinfeld episode somewhere, always.
Always watch it on Netflix is the best.
And it's 20 years old, but it's still funny,
Still makes sense. Yeah, I do. Like, I can see what you mean by like TV had to move in a way. Like they didn't really have a choice in the matter. But I think now, like I think of it now through the light of social media, and some of the old TV shows definitely would have done way better in this age. You think of Jerry Springer or Jerry McKyle or shows like that. Their clips would have been insane. Like, but I suppose like even if you look at like Top Gear, but the problem. But the problem is they wouldn't survive.
I guess Jerry Springer was an early example of.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Jerry Springer was an early example of crowdsourcing too,
Yeah. But like those shows wouldn't survive now. There's so many rules they have to abide by. Like Top Gear I think the 3 of them hosting that would have been in jail by now, like if they'd done it now. But the problem is if they were doing it now and they were putting out clips of it, it would be 100 times bigger than what it was, and it was already massive. Like I do see what you mean by nostalgia. It could work if it was brought back, but I think people are fed up with reboots. Do you not think?
Yeah. I think you might be right. But when I worked for the public radio station in Washington, the NPR station there, they were always fretting that the audience was getting older. But I looked at this. I was lucky enough to see the audience data all the time, and it wasn't the audience was getting older. It was our stuff that was getting older. It was the sound of it. The audience was always the average age of the National Public Radio audience was always 56. It still is. It's just older than they want it to be, but it's not actually getting any older. If you get my drift.
Yeah.
So I think with with this onslaught of statistics, we have to be really careful how we use them. And how we interpret.
Yeah, it's getting a little terrifying. Like, I was reading up on what I just wanted to know out of just general curiosity what people over 40 are doing with TVs now, because it seems like anybody my age and around 25 and 30, they'd never really watch it. But there's a stat that I've done a bit of research on it, and it seems like it's true. Like less than half the people on Earth that are under 35 never watched a minute of TV in the last year. But I would honestly would go further to say they probably didn't even turn it on. It's gone now for those people.
Well, we don't. I've just moved into this new apartment here for a few months, and we don't have a TV. And living with my daughter and her boyfriend, and we don't need one. We've all got laptops. Why do we need one? I think the 40-somethings. I mean, I can't even speak for them anymore, but I think the 40-somethings are desperately struggling to learn the new technology.
Yeah.
Whereas people like me at my age, what I've come across is that people assume that we can't work it. I'm 64. People say, oh, you won't be able to do that job. You won't be able to, do that edit or whatever. I've actually taught myself all the new technology that I need to be, an editor and producer on in digital, but people don't believe it. It's like you're too old to
Easy.
learn.
I like what you said there, though, that you don't have a TV in your new apartment. Because I thought about this, like, the last couple of years in my head when I was, like, prepping. Are TVs just becoming, like, extravagant and expensive mirrors? It almost seems like nobody has any use for them anymore. Is there any point in having one, really? Honestly, is there any point in having a TV?
Well, the only thing they can do, I mean, I think, the cable networks in America, and probably to the same extent here, all they can do is try to block people from watching stuff so that you have to subscribe to their channel, right? Like if there's a big football match or whatever, the only place you can get it is on their network. So everybody subscribes to their network. That's not going to survive much longer, that philosophy. I was watching the Masters golf, and, they drive you crazy, the way that they organize the Masters. In order to watch the Masters golf, because I did not have a cable subscription in the United States, I had to sign up for Paramount Plus, one of their the CBS-owned apps. But that wasn't good enough. If I wanted to see the leaders in the Masters, I want to see Rory McIlroy, I had to also subscribe to Showtime, which comes with Paramount Plus. I've never watched Showtime in my life, and I probably never will. But, obviously on Showtime, they're trying to get rid of these old movies that no one watches. But I ended up paying, I don't know, $10. It's $10 a month, purely because I really wanted to see the final round of the Masters, and I wanted to see Rory McIlroy, beating Scheffler and the rest of them. But then, again, the level of entertainment goes beyond the golf. I think they've realized that people are no longer interested so much in, how valuable your 5-iron is or what make your driver is. It's all personality driven. There's Rory McIlroy's baby. There's Rory McIlroy's wife. There's a picture of Rory McIlroy's mum, on the green in Northern Ireland. There's Scotty Scheffler getting arrested for, knocking over a policeman on his way to the course. It's all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's like, where's the golf gone, guys? Can we see some putting, please?
The streaming service, like, business model, in theory, it works. It is. They're trying to keep up with social media without directly giving up, but it almost feels to me like trying to raise rent on a house that's empty. Like, you can charge all the money you want, nobody's there, because there's so many piracy websites now that you can go and you might have to click off a few ads, but you can get a pretty good quality of the same event, or you can wait a day and watch it back on YouTube in your own time, wherever you want to be. You don't need to stay up late. Like, I don't know. It's almost like convenience is killing streaming services, which their whole business plan was built on originally.
Yeah, I mean, I think the app system will survive. The television, the TV apps will survive, and I think radio will survive, purely because radio is transportable and it's immediate. And like I said, it's a multimedia, it's a multitasking, I should say. It's a multitasking job to listen to radio or podcasting. But I think the apps will survive because they will be niche apps. There'll be one for golf, there'll be one for swimming, there'll be one for right-wing news, one for left-wing news. But that's a whole other can of worms, really, that it's challenging to know where to go now for the real truth within those cable systems.
Yeah, the journalism thing's it's a bit crazy to me. Like, I had a whole episode of an ex-journalist trying to teach me basically how to see fake news on social media and stuff. And even though he was so experienced in it and stuff, you can give tips and things to look out for. There's no real way of stopping it now, because he said it so powerfully. Like, you can just start a social media account and write, "I'm a journalist" on it. people's going to believe you if you say something that supports their opinion. It doesn't even have to be true.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate.
Everybody now is equipped with a camera and a microphone, everybody. So everybody is a journalist, in effect, if they want to be. I think what people have not been taught is, like you say, how to discern fact from fiction. And a lot of the time that's the job of the journalist, but it takes work. You got to go find out. You got to go and ask people and do some research, find out whether something is true or not before you go into print. And that's what people are not doing on social media. They're just repeating other stuff that they've seen from other people, and that's how the dangerous rumors start, or the untrue rumors start.
Yeah, I was reading something on Twitter the other day. One of the people that listened to the show sent it to me, like someone somewhere in Eastern Europe, it might have been Slovenia or something. They got outed on social media for being a fake journalist and faking interviews with important figures in their country. Like they would sit and write articles and write what they would ask the person and then what they would want the person to reply, and got the people in so much problems. It only came to light because one of the people got sued by a company that this person made a fake interview about, and he just looked and goes, "No offense, I've never done no any interviews, don't know who this person is, can you find out who it is?" And whoever owned the social media website looked and goes, "It's not a real person, he's about a 12-year-old person just sitting in his bedroom making up fake interviews." Like, the vast of fake news is way bigger than any of us know.
Yeah, and and then there's the in-between stuff, which is trying to sell you something but telling you it's really important that you know it at the same time, which is where most of I think corporate America is aiming at,
Yeah, they're trying to find.
Funnily enough, this is the best carpet to buy, but funnily enough, this is the exact carpet that we sell right here, for only $11.99 a square yard.
They're becoming those. Do you remember the TV shopping channels where it used to be somebody walking out, different models walking out holding these things like, "This is the best thing I've ever used, this is incredible," and a phone number would come up at the side of the screen, ring to order. It almost like they're reversing back into that. But I don't like. It's like we're talking now about the problems with TV compared to what social media offers, and TV is trying to like raise their production value. They almost are now trying to go into the production value movies have because they see people are amazed by it. They can spend all their money, they can buy big fancy studios, things like that. There's still people out there that are living in their mum's bedroom that just they're still blowing them out of the water, because it almost seems like these TV channels and the producers, and this is something I kind of want to ask you, maybe this could be just conspiracy or what, but do you think these producers have kind of lost touch with reality, and that's why they're struggling to make things that are hitting people in that sweet spot that YouTubers are hitting?
I think I think they kind of got strangled by the use of derivatives. I noticed this in focus groups for places where I've worked. They sort of ask people questions and they kind of have preordained answers. And if you use focus groups too much, it ends up as a sort of enclosing spiral, if you know what I mean, a diminishing spiral into a single answer. And so I think, a lot of those great comedy shows in the 70s and 80s, which is great comedy, and then trying to reinvent them. It's like, I've got a show and it's going to be a cross between, Malcolm and Wise and Dad's Army and David Jason, everything is a cross between something that's already there. Everything is a derivative of something that's already there. And eventually you kind of run out of ideas if you don't have the imagination. And I think the people in these big boardrooms at CBS and NBC are not in touch with the sort of, the people who have the imagination are out there in the digital world. They're not the people who are kind of trying to develop new TV shows. And so that drive for innovation has kind of lost its way in the TV world, I think. And then, of course, there's saturation. We are saturated with content now. So, I mean, every disaster movie has to have, murders, car crashes, cars going over cliffs, people flying off buildings. Been there, done it, had enough of it, really. And I think, so I think there's just way too many choices in that world. And again, I think the people who are looking for something new are looking to the new digital technology, where people are developing new stuff that, actually using their imagination rather than relying on other people's ideas to cobble together for a new thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. When you were saying that, I was thinking of different situations where I've noticed it as well, and yeah, it does make a lot of sense, honestly. But I do want to like kind of finish this off with something that has been playing in my mind so much because I heard it recently. Somebody was like, someone genuinely said to someone that they had ADHD, and they actually did have it, and it was almost like it wasn't taken serious, and I could never understand why. And then I started like researching and looking about why it in the last couple of years it's almost become normal for someone to have ADHD, where in the past it would be really like looked into. And it's because when people are now asked why do you go towards social media instead of TV, it's because I have ADHD and I can't focus for long enough for a TV show. And the problem is now we've all self-diagnosed ourselves with it without saying the fact that it's just because our phone's always in our fucking hands. Do you think that maybe we've where TV shows have struggled to buy in the idea of 5 second grab people's attention straight away, we've almost bought too far into it to now we've thought, now there's something wrong with us because if it doesn't click us right away, we're done.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, good example of that is clickbait. I'm going to criticize my erstwhile colleagues at the Liverpool Echo, who will send me a headline in the morning that says, Mohamed Salah transfer drama, right? And I'm like, Mohamed Salah's leaving, so I'm clicking on it, And the story is like nothing. The story is somebody in some Spanish newspaper said something about Mohamed Salah moving to Spain, whatever, it's just a load of garbage. And I feel like let down. I feel like buyer's remorse. You let me down. You gave me this headline. I spent the time to click on it. So I've given up with the Liverpool Echo's headlines because they're just got a BS all of them. They really are. But let me tell you a story. I was lucky. My kids went to a really good school. They went to a Montessori school in Washington. And one of the things that Montessori does is I noticed they were like 3 years old. One of the first lessons is pouring water. So they give the kids a big, like for a kid, a large jug, and they have to pour the water in the cup without spilling it. And to see the children all practicing this, and then the next thing is, do a wooden puzzle. Here's a wooden puzzle. Do this puzzle. You've got half an hour. Focus. They focus. You see the children focus on the puzzle. No distractions. Quiet in the classroom. No looking around. No buzzings. No, yelping and stuff. Just the puzzle. And so I think doing that, they build a level of concentration that is like the anti-ADHD, if you like. And for us, it's like constant distraction, right? There's the phone. It might be a new email. It might be a new text. It might be, somebody telling me to buy something or go somewhere or do something, and it's making all these sorts of noises, it's no wonder. We're glued to them. And you get to a point where it's like it's too late. You can't put it away, put it in a drawer and lock it. You can't, My son latterly was at a high school in California where they banned phones, where they banned cell phones. And he said there was like a lot of suffering. It was like people like, I want my phone back.
Yeah, there was some.
The world is not going to end today. Probably not. Maybe tomorrow, after this election, but today it's going to be all right. And at 4:00, you can have your phone back.
Yeah, there was something like that, I think, in Wales as well. I'm nearly sure one of the schools tried it for like a week, taking phones off pupils. And I think one of the parents tried to like sue the school for abuse.
Well, I think that there's a genuine concern that, what do we do if there's an emergency, if there's a maniac with a gun in school, or whatever. There are those concerns, unfortunately. But I think increasing numbers of schools in America are taking the phones away from the students.
Be a good idea. I know you're on a time clock, so plug everything you have now. Where can people find you? What are you working on? What have you got coming out?
Yeah, I like I said, I help people start podcasts. So, it's a lot of people who are still like, I don't know how to get started. I have an idea. I don't know where to take it. So I help people editorially. I coach people in broadcasting skills. I can teach them in editorial skills and planning. I can get a podcast up and running on YouTube or on all the other different platforms, Apple and Spotify, etc., for them if they like. And I can edit it so that it sounds really nice And so typically I work with individuals or small businesses. What we find works for the small businesses is if you give people, and this is an encouraging thing, you give people information that they can use, or it's something helpful. You don't try to sell your product for half an hour. That's going to drive people crazy. But if you just sort of give them a helping hand, little tips here and there about, say it's a gardening company, little tips about what to grow and what seasons, what plants to buy, where to get them, how to care for them, those kind of things, Quick example, I have a therapist lady who she runs a therapy practice in Colorado, and she does a podcast every week on different relationship issues. How to get have a better marriage, have a better relationship, have a better love life, those kind of things. And they're hugely successful. What she doesn't do is sort of ram the name of her company down everybody's ears. She just gives advice that people will find helpful. And she says that people call up and say, I listen to your podcast and can you help me? So that's the stuff I do. I'm at, where am I? I'm at markmcdonald.us. That's Mark and then McDonald.us. It's the Irish spelling. And it's the same name on LinkedIn, Mark McDonald.